So we'll get further reaction to that. Dan Tehan, the Shadow Immigration Minister, coming up a bit later in the program. On the cyber strategy, Andrew, also a bit of scrutiny as to the scope of this. What can you tell us?
Well, they've really built it up, Kieran. They've said, oh, we've got this cybersecurity strategy coming out. It's a bit like the employment white paper. That sort of vanished without trace after the release by the Treasurer. Now we've got this, I have to say, a kind of underwhelming cybersecurity strategy after the build-up. It's $587 million over 4 years, on top of $2 billion that the previous government had committed. Clare O'Neill says here, don't just look at the money, it's all these measures that we're putting in place. She calls them 6 cyber shields, working with business, working in terms of education, a series of measures that she says are part of the strategy. It's a bit of a glossy document. Here I ask her if $500 million is enough. Is $500 million over 7 years really adequate then to address this threat? Where's the plans for legislation and a bigger federal contribution here?
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. And just to clarify, it's $587 million over 4 years, not 7. And this is in addition to an investment that was made by the former government into what's called the Red Spice program that you would be aware of. So that's roughly a $2.3 billion investment in the same set of activities.
You have to give them some credit, don't you?
Yeah. So I have been really clear that I think the Red Spice investment was a really important starting point for our country. What the former government seemed to forget about is that there are people outside of government who also need to be harnessed into our activities. So we had a Red Spice investment that was important, that I was supportive of at the time, that I'm supportive of now.
All right, the Minister said about a year ago that this was about making Australia the world leader, should I say, in cybersecurity by 2030. She's changed that now to among the world leaders.
When you announced the strategy last year, you said you want Australia to be the most cyber-secure nation in the world by 2030. The language seems to have changed this morning to be among the world leaders.
Yeah, I think we want to be among the world leaders. I think there's some about this problem that's beyond our control, and I think that's the realistic and achievable goal for us that we can be confident about. We've just got to be really upfront at the beginning of this process. We're going to continue to have cyber attacks. The cyber environment is deteriorating, not just here, but in every single other country in the world.
Lowering ambitions about the shields, as it were. Well, I put to her that a lot of cyber attacks come from the Chinese government. She said they certainly come from 3 countries in particular. How much of an issue is the Chinese government in terms of cyber hacks?
The Australian Signals Directorate articulates the companies... let me start again. The Australian Signals Directorate articulates the countries that are in the background undertaking cyber attacks on Australia and businesses that might be associated with those countries. And it does articulate that China, Russia and Iran are 3 actors who are engaged in this practice. The same mechanisms work, whether it's a state actor or a non-state actor, whether it's someone sitting in their basement in Sydney or a Russian cyber criminal.
Of course, this heightened as an issue after the Medibank Private and Optus hacks and the release of hundreds of thousands of Australians' private information, including on the dark web. Well, Clare O'Neill got up in Parliament at the time and said, we have the smartest and best people chasing you down. Bit of a problem when they're offshore. She addresses that here. All right, when the Medibank hack happened, you got up in the Parliament and you said, we're going to have the toughest and smartest people come after you, and it just appears that's impossible, isn't it? Because aren't a lot of these attacks from offshore? Are most of them from China and Russia?
We are having enormous success in the Hack the Hackers program, which is the task force that was set up in response to what has been unprecedented cybercrime experienced in our country. Hack the Hackers is a flagship initiative of our cyber response. It brings together the smartest cyber guns in the Australian Federal Government, in the Australian Federal Police and the Australian Signals Directorate, and they are right now sitting in offices around this country, hunting down people who would seek to do us harm and debilitating them before they are able to hurt us. There is a lot of success that has been achieved by this task force already. It collaborates with the FBI, with all of our Five Eye partners, and performs what will be a pivotal and growing role in this problem.
Clare O'Neill speaking at that cyber strategy launch. Andrew, while we're reporting on this breaking news out of the Middle East, a ceasefire for all intents and purposes, more than 50 hostages to be released, a really strong show of support for the Jewish community locally.
Yes, the opening of the Holocaust Museum in Melbourne. Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton were both there with some strong words. Peter Dutton's been critical of the government for not doing enough for the Jewish community, but the Prime Minister had some strong words as well as the opposition leader in support of the Jewish community in Melbourne today.
Wherever racism has raised its head, if you look for the leaders of those campaigning and speaking out against it, it is the Jewish community that consistently do that. I turn to the words of Holocaust survivor Peter Gaspar, who lost 40 members of his extended family. The Holocaust didn't start with gas chambers and murders and executions. It started with stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination, hate speech. Those are words to heed each and every single day. What the Holocaust Museum so powerfully reminds us is that when we maintain meaningful contact with the past, we give ourselves our best chance of ensuring it doesn't become our future.
We stand here today having been filled through our television screens of the hate-fuelled mobs marching through major democratic cities calling for the slaughter of Jews. Whenever and wherever the forces of anti-Semitism are on the march, there is a need for moral courage and moral clarity. Right now, there is a need for unequivocal and unqualified condemnations of the anti-Semitism we are witnessing. There must be no tolerance for that which is not tolerated. Moral courage and moral clarity can take many forms. For everyday Australians, a simple act of moral courage which leads to moral clarity is to visit this museum.
The opposition leader there in Melbourne earlier. Andrew, something that you mentioned and in fact you discussed with Clare O'Neill on Sunday Agenda, there's been a bit of a clarification on what she meant about the advice she had received. This is in relation to those detainees released after the High Court ruling.
That's right. So I said to the Home Affairs Minister on Sunday Agenda, look, you're obviously pretty flat-footed here. Why weren't you ready for this High Court decision? She said the advice from her department was that they were likely to win. Now, in the last couple of days, there's been a document tabled in the High Court or released which says on May 26, one officer in the department at least suggested releasing the detainee who brought the case in order to mitigate the risk of losing the case. So that seems a bit contradictory from what Clare O'Neill was saying. I guess she gets advice from several people in the department. This is Clare O'Neill on Sunday Agenda.
We were advised that it was likely that the Commonwealth would win the case, that is, allow us to do what we wanted to do, which is keep these people in detention.
How recently did you receive that advice?
Well, we received that advice from the Department of Home Affairs, who tell us what chances we have of success and failure in each legal case. But I do need you to understand that
when did you receive that advice?
I do need you to understand that our department is one of the most litigated against departments of the Commonwealth.
All right, so she was questioned about this, the Minister, on the ABC this morning.
I was not referring to legal advice when I made comments about the Commonwealth's prospects in that case. I do not, will not ever talk about the legal advice that is provided to the Commonwealth. What I was referring to was operational and policy conversations that were happening with my department that we felt might change, potentially change the outcome of the case. Specifically, could we remove the complainant from the country and end the High Court decision?
Clare O'Neill on the ABC. Andrew, thank you.